This episode is sponsored by JDAQA Software Testing, your scalable solution for manual, automated, security, and performance testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
This is The First Customer, hosted by Jay Agnew.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Brian Magrann. He is the co-founder and CEO of Boilerplate. I met Brian at the PSL Expo and then ran into him at a packed event not too much longer. Brian, welcome to the show, buddy. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a Friday in the summer. My to-do list is always longer than I want it to be, but great to be here. Great to be able to share with you.
Thanks, man. Audience. Thanks for being on. And the smoke is clearing, it looks like, so we can go outside again. That was a wild couple days in Philly.
Yeah, I spent a year in San Francisco, so I got used. They joke that you have two seasons out there. You have shake and bake. Reference the old chicken your mom used to make.
Yeah,
with the earthquakes and the fires. It's a bizarre thing to see. On the East Coast, where you see pictures of, the New York skyline falling, into the red sky and all that stuff.
Yeah, it was, I do astrophotography, so I'm aware of the smoke a little more than just like the common person, because even in the summer when you don't see it on the ground, it's still up in the atmosphere and affects, the shooting that we can do over here. So like I was kind of aware of it, but to see on the ground is definitely like a bizarre thing. So tell me a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up, and what kind of impact did that have on your entrepreneurial journey later down the line?
Yeah, so I grew up in Philadelphia suburbs. My mom's father was an attorney. He had used the GI Bill after World War II to put himself through law school. My dad is first generation college student. His dad was a truck driver. So I kind of have that combination of the white collar side of things, the blue collar side of things. I was brought up, raised to talk to everybody, treat everybody with respect. I think that's really helped me in my journey along the way of just, getting information, meeting people, finding problems, being able to push, potential solutions and offer them. So grew up outside of Philly, went to Penn State, got an accounting degree, summer auditing at Price Waterhouse, and was like, I don't really love auditing. So I had a job offer to go into consulting. So I worked for IBM Consulting out of school. It sounded a little bit sexier, a little more exciting. Hey, I'm going to be 23. I'm going to come and tell established businesses how they can do business better. Thinking that me at 23 actually had a lot of value and insight to bring. But what we were doing was it was called business process transformation, where we would come in and look at a business, we'd map out their processes, figure out where there were inefficiencies, redundancies, pain points, and then help those clients implement software to make the business run more efficiently. So typical of what your Accentures of the world still kind of do. So part of that experience, Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast in 2005, and we were kind of voluntold to go help. So I found myself, it's an old military joke. Go, you voluntold to do this.
I like that. I've never actually heard that before. It's brilliant. I do have my kids a lot. I voluntold them a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, that's they get free room and board. So that's part of the trade-off, right? And so I found myself 6 weeks after Hurricane Katrina, which for people that don't remember that, I mean, the entire city of New Orleans flooded, the levees broke, New Orleans flooded, the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I mean, literally everything within half a mile of the Gulf of Mexico just kind of got washed away. So tremendous personal impacts, incredible, impacts on the local government. So we actually helped run a $1 billion loan program for local governments. And they're like, our entire parish is underwater. The tax assessor is going to have some problems collecting real estate taxes.
Right.
Or the strip mall washed into the Gulf of Mexico. I don't think we're going to be collecting a lot of sales tax revenue. But very interesting experience working there. That kind of, got me into this, seeing these problems around collecting documentation requests, which was kind of trivial, but like a big part of what we were doing day to day beyond once, the helicopters are done and the stabilization side. There's a long-term aspect to disaster recovery that's just a ton of administrative paperwork, as you can imagine, with federal government involved.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that and then worked for a specialty consulting firm for a number of years. Then after Hurricane Sandy hit New York, I went to work directly for the federal government. Spent about 5 years there. Came in, hey, let's change things. Let's make it better. Got a few things through that I was actually surprised. We did make some really positive improvements.
Right.
But as a lot of people see in the federal government, it just grinds up. It's so tough to get stuff done. I had proposals and they're like, well, this is great. This is really efficient. This eliminates too many jobs. We can't really be doing that. And then it turned into kind of this like endless travel. 3 years in New York, amazing. DC is a good city. Springfield, Missouri, Denton, Texas, some places like that for indefinite periods of time just kind of wear on you. And you feel like you're kind of missing out on, normal life.
Right.
So from here, I left federal service. I went to work for a startup in San Francisco in the cannabis space. So they had just gotten recreational cannabis had just gone legal in California. Somebody who had a license and like, hey, we're trying to build up a distribution business. What was interesting there, I'm like, well, how does that connect? Well, it's highly regulated, tons of paperwork, tons of documentation. And as you can imagine, a lot of people that were in that industry previously, there was no paperwork because paperwork in the cannabis industry was evidence. And people didn't like that.
Right.
Did that for a year and then kind of was like, my family, my girlfriend at the time, were all on the East Coast. I own a house here. So I decided to move back. And that's when I started, my own software.
Wow. Well, just like we talked about before the show, I saw the genesis to boilerplate in your career. Like you said, the contracts, the federal government work, all the paperwork side of things. So what problem did you kind of identify and set out to solve with boilerplate?
Yeah. So the problem was this concept of you're making documentation requests to another person. So we're intaking somebody for a loan and we're going to email them a checklist of 15 things that they need to do. They need to fill out certain forms. They need to provide certain supporting files that go with that. And you multiply by that, but say, okay, we've got 50 municipalities we're working with. We need, 20 things from each of them. I now have a full-time job trying to juggle 1,000 documentation requests I've got, we used to get federal, we'd get inquiries from senators and congress people, governor's offices. And it was like, you jumped immediately when Senator so-and-so calls your boss and says,
right,
what's going on with this? So we saw this pain point around just tracking documentation requests. I met a technical co-founder through a startup program who was building onboarding software. He had worked for a couple of big tech companies. He's from the EU. So he went through the whole paperwork process of being able to come and work legally in the US. And he's like, big name tech companies are emailing me 3 times to give them a copy of my passport.
Right.
He's like, isn't there a better way here? So that's kind of where we brought that together around that pain point of people that are just swimming in documentation requests. They're trying to keep track of everything. Their clients, their new employees, whoever the other party is frustrated because, like, I already gave you this. I've given you this twice now. In some cases, it's not the right thing. And then that falls through the cracks. Being in the federal space, particularly FEMA work, we had a lot of turnover because everybody was deployed somewhere. So someone would go somewhere and they're like, all right, I've been out for 90 days. I've got something that I need to be doing at home. And they would leave. And then the next person comes in and tries to pick up where they left off. Well, everything's disorganized. The files aren't named. I don't know what's here, what's not here.
Right.
And they're like, it just started this cycle over. And especially in disaster relief where they're like, they've got a lot going on. That's the worst day of their professional career is, oh, shoot, our municipality or our school district is underwater or the building's gone, whatever it is. Plus, their personal life may have been impacted. Most of these people lived in the same communities. So only that, they're dealing with their house got flooded. They can't find their grandmother. There's all these other things. And the last thing we need to be doing is like, oh, hey, let me ask you for the same thing again.
Right. So I love the problem. I love the solution. How are you taking obviously a massive market and identifying who to go after first?
Yeah, great question. So when we started out, we launched in January of 2020. So I had just spent a lot of time in San Francisco. So I had friends that were in these like service businesses. I had a friend that ran a bartending service. I had somebody that used to do pop-up like gourmet cannabis dinners, which are actually pretty interesting. I had somebody that just started a business doing like personal home organization. This is something like kind of unique to the Bay Area, but like
Mm-hmm.
time is the most valuable resource
Yeah.
in the eyes of so many successful people because they've got the money and it's like, I need the money to buy me time. So this concept of professional organizers that would go out, go into your home. So we kind of had all these lined up. We started working with the organizing company. First day we got a list of feedback of stuff that we needed to fix or improve. And then like by the time we were a couple weeks later, we're like, great, we got this, most of this resolved, and then our business is done. COVID just hit. We don't have, we're not sending organizers in people's homes.
Right.
Oh, nobody's hiring bartending services. Nobody's coming to these dinners, those types of
Mm-hmm.
things. So, but that was kind of where we started out. So this was just people we knew, talking to them. Do you have this problem? Would this solution be helpful?
Right.
Now, in the long term, those were not, your ideal long-term clients is not somebody that hires 5 people a year, the catering service. 20 people a year was more, we're at a point where we're doing so much volume of document requests. This is a full-time person, or this is
Mm-hmm.
a full-time team
Right.
where we can say, and what we're seeing in the marketplace is the $20 an hour office worker largely doesn't exist anymore. That because you can go out and drive for Uber and DoorDash and those and make $20, $30 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of people, we're talking today, your kid's last day of school. And like for some people, they say, oh, well, I've got to work if I have a normal job, I have to work 8 to 4, but my kid gets home from school at 3. So I've got to figure out an hour
Right.
of coverage
Yeah.
as opposed to, well, I can turn the app on. I can deliver it at 2:45 when I need to be done. I turn the app off. I go home and the money hits my account that day.
Yep.
I don't really go in. I don't get fired. I just don't get paid. So the gig economy has really shifted that entry-level office worker position that doing a lot of that work of chasing down stuff. And then on the higher end side of it, it's some people just don't have an assistant, but they're a tax preparer, they're a financial planner, they're, those types of roles. They're an attorney, and their time is not best spent jockeying email attachments.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Very interesting. I almost, if everybody wasn't just ground down and tired of hearing about the pandemic, just a podcast about how people had to pivot during the pandemic. There's so many stories about how like something you thought was going to be it was not it. And I hear that time and time and time again. So very interesting that you guys had to do the same thing. So what's your niche today? Who are you going after? Like who's your ideal customer for Boilerplate today?
Right. So we do it in a couple areas. It's still people that are juggling lots of email attachments or sharing a cloud folder link and trying to keep track of all the submissions. Most of our growth right now is from an HR sense. It's
Mm-hmm.
onboarding employees and contractors, generally in regulated fields. So think education. You're putting somebody in a room with a child. The amount of paperwork that they absolutely have to have on file and need to sure is there. Healthcare, the home care, the paramedics, EMTs, people in that space where you have licenses and credentials. We do work with some government contractors, transportation from an HR sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also do some work in financial services where you're onboarding a client. So you're working with a new financial planner and they're like, hey, here's all the stuff we need you to give us, or an insurance broker. Here's all the stuff I need you to give me so that I can start working with you, and making sure that kind of that first like material step of the engagement goes smoothly, whether it's a new hire and there's a lot of competition for qualified workers right now. as we see with the interest rate or unemployment rates. So you can't get an offer letter out to a person quickly. If you can't get out and get them all their paperwork, get them ready to work, they're still talking to other employers.
Right.
It's similar to dating, where these people that are on these apps and these sites, they're getting bombarded all day. They're applying for how many jobs they apply for. We need to get this person in the door as quickly as possible. It's kind of annoying to look for a job, but we can make it really easy for them, get them in the door quickly and get going. That's a win for the HR team. It's a win for the financial planners, the people in financial services that need to quickly and easily onboard clients. We're working with more established players because there's all these startups. You hear all these stories of the neobanks and the robo-advisors and all those things. And if you're a human that's still doing this, you still need to, they want that technology service level, but they also want the human touch that goes with it. And we kind of provide that.
That's interesting. I one of my favorite lines is when I'm pitching our services for software testing is that everybody thinks that they've seen a fully automated testing setup, but it's like a picture of, it's like Bigfoot. Like everybody thinks they've seen it, but it's just like a blurry picture off in the woods. Like you still need a human being involved in just about everything. Like there's no just turnkey magic, whatever, but it is having those tools to assist the humans is where it kind of all the magic kind of comes together. And it sounds like it's kind of the same thing for you guys. So what would you say, or what held you back initially from starting something like Boilerplate? I mean, it's a great idea. Was it just kind of having to live through the problem for all those years and kind of recognizing what it was? Like, what do you think held you back from starting it until you did?
Yeah, so I've always been like an ideas person. I'm reading a book right now called The Six Working Geniuses. It talks about like the mental strengths of different people. I was always someone that could kind of see the opportunities, maybe ahead of the curve a little bit, but I wasn't as strong on the execution. So it was great. I've got this idea. I have lots of ideas, but I'm like, I don't know how to execute this from a technical standpoint. I've figured out that, there's always room for improvement, but I figured out, the sales, the marketing, the operations, the finances, the HR, all that front of the house business stuff. I don't know how to build software.
Right.
So for me, it was a matter of connecting with someone that could do that had that skill set that was complementary to me. Obviously, I've learned a lot through that journey, and there's things that, going back to the beginning, we waited, almost a year, I believe it was over a year, to actually bring in like our first person to help. And what we find is, if you're not familiar with software, it's CSS, which is like, oh, these two boxes are touching on the screen. They should be, a quarter inch apart. Well, for someone that doesn't know how to do front end coding, that took me like 30 minutes. And I'm like, well, that's not good use of your time. Well, let's hire somebody that can do this for a much better rate. And you don't have to deal with those little tedious things on the software side.
Yeah.
So for us, it was bringing in that expertise sooner. I think you get I think any rock star software engineer kind of believes that they can build anything.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I can build it. And it's like, well, yes, you probably can. Most software companies will tell you they can build almost anything. It's a matter of how quickly they can do it. Do they have the experience doing it before to kind of know where those pitfalls are and things that you don't want to touch? So we've started, and so we kind of moved into more of, let's hire for expertise for things that we don't know how to do. Sure, you want to try it, kick the tires for a couple days if you can figure it out. If not, we're going to go get somebody that knows how to do this.
Yeah.
And they're going to be able to do it in the fraction of the time. Win-win for everybody.
Yes. And it's a mindset, I think, right? It's like the delegation mindset. Like once you kind of get into it and you start to understand, like, oh, like my friend who I part of this mentorship program, it's something as simple as like painting, right? I realized the other day, he's like, I could hire this guy to paint this room for me for like $100. He's like, it would have taken me all day. I had to go get the stuff. I have to do this. He's like, my whole day is gone. He's like, and I could have just, once I realized I could pay this guy to do it. And that's like such an applicable, lesson to exactly what you're saying and just to business in general. not just programming, everything, right? Like, I mean, I'm a delegation machine. I like, as soon as I see something that I think somebody else can be doing except for me, other than me, it's gone. Like, it's off my plate. And I think that's a really important lesson. All right. So it kind of maybe is the same answer, but I still want to ask it anyway. If you had to start Boilerplate again tomorrow with everything you've learned so far, what would be step one in starting that business tomorrow?
Step one would be, getting to product market fit sooner. We started out with a very, very broad potential customer base of, hey, who's juggling lots of email attachments? And then we've kind of learned that there's a lot of nuances to everybody's doing something slightly different.
Right.
So it would have been making that really hard push to finding one niche very early and going deep on that niche and then expanding instead of kind of hopped around in a lot of things. COVID kind of impacting that of, I used to be able to go to speed networking events and meet all these people. And then you're kind of like, COVID was a little weird of going to virtual Zooms. I got some exposure to great people, but it also like, there was a certain flakiness to the internet where like, there's something to be said for meeting someone in person, being able to shake their hand, look in their eye, and then going from there, being able to do business. And we certainly have clients that we've never met in person,
right?
But those things help. So one would be getting to product market fit faster. The second would be hiring specialists and figuring out where we can take shortcuts, especially building software. There's things that, sounded like there's a 4 to 6 week problem that turns into a 4 to 6 month problem. And, we want to have it all proprietary, this and that. And then there's also things where like, this is just a blocker, long term of we miss out on potential customers, or by the time we get around to finishing it, they found another solution. So that's, I think, the biggest thing for us is getting, and you can go on these marketing, these, job sites for the gig workers, and you can find pretty much any specialist you're looking for. So and the key is just being able to manage them. What we see is, especially if you're using overseas talent, it's, you tell them to do A and C, and some of them will just do A and C, whereas good person's going to be like, I did A, B, and C. And a really good person's going to be like, I did A, B, and C, and here are my suggestions for D, E, and F. This would be logical. But a lot of those workers, because of the way that the normal work environments, they told me to do this, may not make sense, but this is what I was told to do, so I'm going to do exactly what they said.
Right.
Even, I think back to that scene from The Office where Michael and Dwight are in the car following the GPS, and it's saying, turn right. And Dwight's like, that's a lake, Michael. And he's like, nope, the machine told us to turn right. I'm going to turn right. And they drive into the lake.
Yeah.
And you kind of get that with some of the talent if it's not very well scoped, very well managed. You also learn how to spot the signs of trouble.
Yep.
In interview process, one of the best quotes I heard is, difficult to hire, difficult to manage. And if it's hard to get somebody in the door, it's really hard to just schedule an interview with them. It's going to be difficult to work with them.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're looking at.
I 100% agree with that. And to follow up on that, Mike Black, who ran Told Media, which was like a digital agency, he's still in the area doing stuff. One of the things he told me years ago was, first impressions in business are correct, right? And like, it's to your point, like, if they're a pain in the ass to hire, they're going to be a pain in the ass somewhere down the line. If they're flaky it doesn't matter what the excuse is or the problem is, the whatever, it almost always, we've had like 2 people not work out after, I must have hired, hundreds of people over the last several years, and maybe 2 of them really just didn't work out. And those are 2 people that had issues early on. And I should have just been like, nope, we're good. And I learned that lesson and move forward. So let's switch gears a little bit. We're all trying to stay healthy. We're all trying to live as long as we possibly can. What are 3 health tips that you're kind of doing on a day-to-day basis to increase your longevity?
Yeah. So first, and I can't stress the future, if you don't have an Apple Watch, I was out trying to do my steps every day, exercising every day, and it doesn't matter what it is. It's this concept of you got to just go out get your heart rate up, get your blood moving, those things. It's obviously tougher when it's raining and cold and those things. But the idea of Apple Watch that tracks it and warns you, hey, once an hour, hey, get up, go take a walk, go stand up. Doing those things, I think, is something that absolutely everybody, if they can afford one, new or secondhand, should be doing in some form or fashion. The second one, I think, is actually related to mental health. And what was interesting to me is living in San Francisco, I was surrounded by startup founders and successful entrepreneurs, and they would talk about mental health. And I think on the East Coast and some other parts of the country, you think of just people that are, a couple screws are loose or they're depressed or whatever it is. And like, no, your brain is a muscle. And so just like if you're out on your feet all day running around, you got a bunch of kids, like, I'm sure you can relate to this, of just chasing children around all day is physically exhausting. Well, your brain only has a certain amount of mental juice too. So thinking about those things, and that's where you get into that idea of like, your brain does need rest. And as an entrepreneur, there's always more to do. There's always going to be more to do.
Right.
And making sure that as best you can, you're singling out the priorities or what's going to move the needle. So when you talk about that, the first impressions are usually right about employees, it goes the same with customers. If I'm on a call with somebody and they're interested in using our service, they say, hey, can you send me a video I can share with my team? Can you share me a proposal? It's like, that has to go out that day. You want to strike while that iron's, because that's the first impression. And you want it to be easy. We handhold with our customers. I use the analogy of, you want to get somebody to, as they're coming on board with our software. And I use the analogy of like, you're trying to get somebody to ski for the first time. If you just drop them off in the parking lot with a bunch of gear versus, I'm going to get you dressed. I'm going to get you up the lift. We're going to get you to the top of the bunny slope. Now, there may be some little issues getting down the slope, but ultimately you're going to get down the slope and we're going to be there to help you and do better the second time. Pretty quickly, people were doing it all on their own. And that's kind of been our approach with customers, is let's make sure that they're successful right out of the gate doing that. And we tangented there from the health thing.
No, that's fine.
But that's where I see things. So that having a certain amount of mental juice, also being able to prioritize of what you're doing with that mental stuff, being able to say no to things. And early on, that's really hard when you're trying to build out a customer base. You're trying to grow revenue, and everyone's, every other founder you meet go, oh, what's your ARR? What's your annual recurring revenue? That type of thing. What's your growth rate? And so you meet somebody and you put in the effort of getting a call scheduled with them, and you talk through it. You're like, yeah, we want to do it. And you just, at points you realize and say, hey, I don't think we're going to solve what you need. And this is going to take more of that mental juice from me, from my team. So being able to do that and think in that regard. Third, in terms of the health stuff, I think it's just taking a break from what you're doing. You're in such a grind all the time. You're just, there's always a customer question. There's always something to review, something that somebody wants you to look at. Part of that ties to getting better with who you're hiring and hiring people that can work more autonomously. Like that analogy of like, you give them A and C and they know what B should look like, as opposed to you having to handhold that staff. So that's part of it. There's a value of just take a day where you don't, weekends are easier, where you don't look at your computer screen, and you go to the beach, you go hiking, you do whatever, you're out with friends and family doing your stuff, but you're not knee deep in, and your brain rests. That's why certain religions call for a day of rest, where it's like, and you look back, a lot of the religious rules tie to like general life survival rules. And like, well, we're just going to bake this into the religion. Certain ones that didn't eat pork. People didn't understand what trichinosis was, but they understood that, oh, well, people are eating pork and they're dying from this, probably because they were eating undercooked pork that had diseases. So like, we're just going to make a rule where you don't do this. The same with the idea of a Sabbath, taking a day off every week. No, we don't always do this, but those are the things that I think a lot of people, when you think of health, people think of diet, which is obviously important. They think of exercise, but also giving yourself a break.
Yeah, no, I love that. Those are all three excellent things that I subscribe to. So I definitely agree. All right, so let's do the mystery question. I still don't have a sounder for this. I need a cool like mystery sounder, mystery question. So I've been trying to frame this a little differently, non-professional, because if you go with the professional route, it's very easy to give the cheap answer. So I'm going to go non-professional in your personal life, physically, mentally, emotionally, altruistically, whatever you want to answer with. What is one thing you would do if you knew you couldn't fail?
One thing I would do if I knew I couldn't fail. That's interesting.
You can take a second. It's fine. There's always a pause.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
if I let you do business, you would just say, I want my business to be the greatest thing in the world. And I've had a few of those, so I was like, I got to break it out to be a little more something that you would want to do that, maybe you're afraid to do because you'd fail.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's leaving a positive, noticeable impact, on the world when I leave. Being
Okay.
able to look back and say, and I volunteer in my local community. I'm in a mentorship program with Penn State. I have a lot of things that long term, depending where the business goes, if it's, we get to a point where we get acquired or I can actually hire people that kind of run it day to day.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be doing long term to help improve education, help greener communities. I love parks. I love biking. Being able to contribute to things that I'm passionate about
Mm-hmm.
and being able to do that in a way that takes the business skills that I've learned. When you're doing founding sales, you're learning how to build consensus. You're learning how to get agreement with people. You're learning how to, move deals along, move things along. It's big picture. You're also learning that there's a networking side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Meeting people without looking for anything in return, just kind of like, hey, how can I help you out with your business? What's going on? Those types
Right.
of things.
Yeah.
Giving advice, like I said, mentoring college students, volunteering locally. But then those are the same people that you come up with a good idea later. And you're like, I don't care who gets the credit for this, but like, hey, this could be a really good thing to do, in
Mm-hmm.
this community, or how we're helping children, how we're helping people with financial literacy, whatever it might be, of kind of having that network in place. So when you come up with these good ideas and you learn how to pilot things somewhere and see that it's working, or pull ideas from somewhere else and say, how can we implement this here? And then how can we spread this to other places and give
Right.
kind of that handbook that other people can run to say, oh, hey, this worked really well. Let's do it here. Do those things in a sense that there's a positive impact on the world. I also have some, entertainment things. I have some screenplays I'm working on. I have a book I'm writing, things like that, I need that time and mental capacity to finish. But those would be things that I really, there's stories and lessons and things like that. And some of them are pretty entertaining that I'd want to be able to share and kind of like leave that lasting legacy.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Multi-part answer to a somewhat thought-provoking question.
What
All
is
right.
your answer to that question?
I don't know, man. People have asked me that. I've had some really cool answers that are just kind of like bucket list stuff. I'm not a mountain climber guy,
Mhm.
but I would love to hike Mount Everest, and that's like a cheap answer in the sense that like a lot of people would probably like say that or something, but like I love like that. I get sweaty like looking at those guys that do like the free climbing up the sides of the mountain. I think it would be like so badass, but I just know that like my internal fear would be so like I probably wouldn't get a foot off the ground before I was like, all right, this is good enough. So maybe doing like one of those free climbs like all the way up the side of a mountain would be pretty gnarly. If I
Okay.
knew I couldn't fail and die, I think that would be a pretty cool one. So, all right. So, where can they find more about Boilerplate and Brian? Where do we find that stuff? And I'll put it in the show
So
notes when we're done.
Our website is boilerplate.co. It was kind of like trendy a couple years ago. In hindsight, I wouldn't, because people instinctively think it's .com.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the one-word domains are bought up already.
Yeah.
And like more than the crest of a car, we're a bootstrap startup. I don't know if we're going to do this.
Yep.
So yeah, boilerplate.co. We got some demo videos on the site. We're open to talking to anybody that's got, like I said, if you're running around chasing document requests, always open to those conversations, giving honest assessments of whether we can help. We're starting to pull out the integrations too, so they'll work alongside. We just got integrated with Box, cloud provider called Ignite. We got a couple more in the works to really be complementary to existing software. I'm on LinkedIn, Brian with an I, Magrann, and always looking to talk. I try to spend a little bit of my time every week trying to help other people out too. So,
love it, man. I love it. Well, I'll link your profile. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll link you. People should reach out. Very thoughtful guy. I love the product. I think you guys are on to something. So we'll link, obviously, boilerplate.co in the show notes, not .com. I hope you have a great weekend. Stay clear of the smoke. I think it's gone for now. But you were great, man. Thanks for being on, and we'll talk to you soon, all right?
Awesome. Thanks so much. It was great.
Thanks, Brian. Have a good one, man. See ya.